had these numbers on their arms, and my father would wake up screaming often.
New York is talking this week about the image one magazine put on its cover.
A complicated message about cops and police brutality.
A Tennessee school board has banned the critically acclaimed graphic novel Mouse.
I never thought I would live to see something where America, which saved my parents after the war, could be tilted toward a new kind of fascism.
So, welcome my beloved friend, Art Spiegelman. You know, when I took over the New Yorker, I was determined, as well as to sort of changing and, sort of radicalizing the approach editorially, that one of the things I really wanted to do was to sort of shake up the covers, because until then they'd been these very sort of polite scenes on the cover of sort of Connecticut, picket fences and barns and things, and they were a complete snooze fest. And I thought, who can I get to just be transgressive? And then I realized, of course, that Art Spiegelman had just won the Pulitzer Prize. And this was 1992, and I started dialing around, trying to get your phone number, and the rest is history. Art joined the New Yorker and became an absolutely integral, important part of the whole kind of revamp of the New Yorker that I took over. So it's so good to have you with us.
Thank you. When I first met Tina, she was saying, I never grew up with the New Yorker. I didn't care about it much one way or the other. And I said, yeah, me too, except for some of the cartoons. So it was a perfect folie à deux to change the magazine.
Now, that's not a very attractive anecdote, actually.
That's okay. It made a better magazine.
It did make a better magazine. By the way, are you vaping?
I am indeed.
Okay, well, that's... Don't tell anybody. So, your first cover for my New Yorker was the 1993 Valentine's Day cover, which was just about 4 months after I got there. And it had didn't expect the seismic reaction that it had, but it really, really did. And why do you think that it had such an extraordinarily kind of explosive reception?
I don't know. I didn't even know I was being transgressive. It was just like puffing on this e-cigarette. But it was in the wake of the Crown Heights riots, where the West Indian Jamaican community and the Hasidic community in that part of Brooklyn came to blows, and it was really a horrible scar on the city. And that was the time when I was being asked to sit down and do a cover, and I was looking through them, and they work with holidays a lot. There's a Christmas cover, a Valentine's cover, that was coming up. And then I was just doodling, so I was drawing that guy with a monocle, Eustace Tilley, and just trying to see what could come out of focusing on the New Yorker's central figure. And just by doodling, at some point I added a beard and a Hasidic hat. And I didn't know what I was making even, but it's like, oh, that's nice to look at. And then having them kiss and make up, these two sides of the community, I thought that's nice. Valentine's Day, the two sides should kiss and make up. Instead, it was sort of like worse than anything Trump stumbled into, It was, I was in Florida at the time for an opening of a show of my work in a museum that was having a cartoon show. And then I'm in the hotel room with my wife and kids. And Maury Pearl, the then publicist for it, says, okay, just pack up and come up and don't speak to anybody. So I had no idea what was going on, but I was following orders. And we show up at the lobby of the airport, and we're surrounded by hundreds of journalists, just everybody who could fit into that space. and I didn't even know what I was being asked about. It just looked like me, my wife, and my kids were all trying to escape to Cuba. And the questions were appropriately organized in that direction. And it turned out that as a result, it did in one blow what you were doing inch by inch already, which is how do we make people pay attention to a magazine that's decades old and seen as, not seen as transgressive, seen as serious. It did stuff about Hiroshima and so on, about conservation with Rachel Carson. But I didn't know what I was getting into. It was just, that looks nice. But the way it got in was because you had another image by a friend of mine, Charles Burns. And it was another competitive picture for the anniversary cover of Eustace Tilley. He drew something so monstrous. I can't even explain it. If you haven't seen it, you have to look it up on the internet or something. But as soon as it was shown to the other editors, they exhaled and said, oh, okay, as long as you don't use that one, use this, it's fine.
So what do you think it is that a cover like this can do that a text piece can't? I mean, what is the sort of goal when you do a picture like that?
The goal is to make something that's interesting to me and then hopefully to others. But the reason that these things work so well is an image with an idea in it just is exactly what you have in your brain. Before you turn it into words or pretty pictures or whatever, it's how ideas fuse together with something visual and something conceptual. And that's been a guiding light for how covers should work when they're not barn doors.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. I mean, I have a print of your next cover hanging in my apartment because it is one of my favorites. The New Yorker had never done a fashion issue before, and I thought it would be interesting to kind of apply the New Yorker lens to the sort of world of fashion. And I must say that, I mean, Art Spiegelman wouldn't have been the first person that you would think might do a fashion cover, but I thought, well, why not, give it a go with Art? And he came back. I just love this cover. And what was in your mind when you did this? I mean, I just love these rather
what is she thinking?
Overweight.
A fashion cover? Are you kidding? Well, I think what was really in my mind was how do I acquit myself in these both directions? So drawing fashion is not one of the first things I sit down to think about, but by thinking of what it is to be watching somebody half naked on a runway and all these people just like being able to sit judgmentally, flipping the script and having all the naked people in the audience, made it more interesting. And those kind of shoes, you'll know what the name of the shoe designer
Blahnik, was it the Manolo Blahnik's shoe?
Yeah. So I didn't even know what it was called, but I did know that those things were around. And I think that's striking to have in a foreground. So it came together without that much trouble conceptually, but I must have done 40 drawings before I found it.
I know,
I usually only do about 35. This was...
Yeah, well, I absolutely adore it. And then just to, we'll stop talking about the covers in a minute, but the next cover that caused me untold problems.
Oh, before we go on, something I wanted to tell you about the Hasidic cover.
Oh, what was that?
Letters were coming into the magazine about that cover, very irate. And there's one letter about the cover that came from a young girl, and the person was sorting through this. You gotta see this one. And there's this kid just saying she thought it was really sweet that on Lincoln's birthday there would be a picture of Lincoln kissing a slave.
Well, that shows.
So you have to have a certain amount of information in your head to make sense of these fused images. Sorry, I was interrupting.
No, I mean, we had an Easter cover coming up, so I said to Art, we need an Easter cover, and I didn't expect him to do a crucified Easter bunny on a tax return. Okay, I mean, I knew when I saw this cover, I just thought, oh God. But I also had this kind of inner commitment, a sort of macho sense that I was going to always stand behind, Art Spiegelman. Even though everyone in the office would say, we can't publish this, we can't publish this. I can't possibly tell Art that I can't publish this cover. I've got to publish this cover for Art. I can't do it. So there we were, tax return, crucified bunny, out it went into the world. And I mean, I got like 1,000 sort of pain, sorrowful, well-written letters that hurt your heart from miserable Catholics, all over America, just sort of asking me why I would do such a terrible, sacrilegious, awful thing. I felt like such a heel. It was awful. And David Remnick, who was actually at that point a writer in the magazine, was sort of looked out of the window of his office and he saw this huge kind of mass of people walking down Broadway, and he freaked out and he thought, they're coming for us. It turned out to be an Easter parade, actually. But
yeah, a lot of police on that line as well.
A lot of police.
But the only reason you got it is because you were asking me, like I was not handing in things every week, but I was under contract. Just show me what you're thinking about. So I figured, okay, Easter's coming up, I'll show you what I'm thinking about. I never dreamed you were going to run it. I just wanted to show you what I was thinking.
I did not know this until I ran into you the other day.
Yeah, that was
Yeah, I know. And you actually told me after all this misery that you didn't really think I was ever going to publish it. So, I mean, you know.
Wait, there's another anecdote connected to that that's worthwhile, which is, at that point, Maury Pearls again just said, drop everything. I know you're in Paris. Could you please come back immediately? And so they got me on, what was it called? The Superjet that was around for a while in France. The Concorde, yes. So going on the Concorde back with mostly basketball players, and it was mainly to be on an afternoon news show that Maury had set up. And they had me on the show, and they had some Father Coughlin kind of guy, whatever, next to me, and he's going on about what a sacrilege it is and whatever. And then the microphone is turned toward me and said, what do you have to say to Father Coughlin? And I said, mea culpa. And she just dragged me off the stage. That was the end of my interview tour.
So I've just had a message from the management here saying, you are not allowed to smoke. So are you going to get me into as much trouble as the Easter Bunny?
She knew nothing about it. I just do this everywhere I go, and it's got a very mild vape coming out of it. You'll never smell it, even in the first row. Well, but I needed to be able to think.
All right, well, I don't know what's going to... You may get rushed on the stage.
Okay, mea culpa.
So let's go to the genesis of your most famous, sort of revered work, celebrated work anyway, which is Mouse. And, you know, your parents endured and survived, you know, the horror of Auschwitz. Talk about what it was like to grow up in that household, because you had a pretty dark childhood, frankly.
Yeah, I did. Well, both parents survived at that time, and they hung out with other people who'd also, that was their social set, basically. So I grew up with it as a kind of dark fact of life that I didn't know that much about. But I felt all the effects, like I think in the promo here there was something about him waking up screaming, which he would. And my mother was always nervous. If he went out of the house to work, she'd be standing by the window like a dog waiting for a master to come home where it would be safe again to be in the house. So there was that. There's a little photo in their bedroom that had been blown up to be a big photo of what would have been my brother had he lived, and that was kind of a shrine spot in the bedroom. And one of the problems I had was they had the son they wanted. What were they doing with me? And it wasn't that clear. So there was a kind of sibling rivalry with a sibling I couldn't...
And what happened to your brother?
What happened to him?
Yeah.
He got poisoned by my aunt when they thought they'd sent him to safety, and it was clear that household was being sent to the death camps. So my mother's sister gave cyanide to her kids, to herself, and to my brother.
It's an unbelievable story, actually.
And the other people all died, of course.
Yeah.
Anyway, the ones in that household.
I mean, it's such tragedy. And out of that, you created a comics masterpiece. And you turned to draw Mouse, which took you how many years?
13.
13 years. And Mouse showed the world really for the first time that comics could address the most profound of subjects, you know, which is, of course, the Holocaust. And it was also met with a barrage of people who said that to portray, you know, the Holocaust survivors and victims as mice was absolutely the worst expression of bad taste.
Yeah, but, you know, I backed into this. I didn't know how it was. I didn't know it was coming. It was just, at some point, underground comics, which was my natural domain, were there to be transgressive, and it led to a kind of autobiographical set of comics, and that kind of inched me into doing this 13-year-long thing. And the main metaphor I had was, when I was trying to draw people, it all looked fake, because I don't know what everybody looked like. I could look up a building or a gate of a concentration camp, but I couldn't know what everybody looked like, so I was looking for masks, for a way to neutralize it so that the story would take place on a relatively blank visual with the ideas filling it out. In other words, that mouse is just a little triangle. It doesn't look like a real mouse, it doesn't even look like Mickey Mouse, but it's a blank spot. And I was inspired by, there was a comic strip called Little Orphan Annie in the 1930s, and instead of eyes, they just had like poker chips for eyes, blank chips. And I realized that that was the most emotional comic strip I was reading when looking back through the history of comics, and that gave me a cue to make the faces as close to looking like Little Orphan Annie's eyes as they could, so that you would project yourself inside the image and make it work that way. And I just got there because basically, Zyklon B, that was the gas in the concentration camps, it was a pesticide. So rodents are pests, and what chases rodents? Cats. So it was a dumb metaphor that I wanted to deconstruct and destroy while telling a story that you had to believe in.
I did not realize the pesticide link in your mind. I think that's an extraordinary thing to know. And of course, it was such a success, right? I mean, it became such a phenomenon. It's taught in every school. It won you the Pulitzer Prize. I mean, you were just, it was amazingly successful. It still is. But it became like the sort of the rodent on your shoulder, right? I mean, you could
I've been chased by a 500-pound mouse ever since. And no matter what I do, it's good, but it's, it's good. But your other stuff, I don't know, it's kind of strange. But Mouse is great, nothing else like it. And I got this line from Joseph Heller that helped me through it. It says, yes, but what is?
Yeah.
So that was useful.
Well, I'm also a huge admirer of your brilliant wife, the art editor Françoise Mouly. And in fact, I admired her so much that I hired her to be the New Yorker cover editor. So Art and Françoise became the incredible visual duo of the New Yorker. She's still in that role today, 33 years later, where she's now this iconic figure in the sort of cover world of American journalism. And her... she's here in the audience. Where are you, darling? Françoise. Okay, Françoise. How much does Françoise's artistic eye and how much is your collaboration sort of part of your own work? I mean, do you discuss...
I can't imagine of even starting... I wouldn't even have been able to imagine starting this long 13-year project if I wasn't with somebody as intelligent and as willing to deal with my darker side, let's say. She was aiding and abetting. Plus, when I first met her, she was in architecture school in France playing hooky in New York. We'd gotten together. She'd seen some comics of mine, called me, and we spoke for 4 hours on the phone because she wanted to know about that comic strip about my mother's suicide. So even though she hated the phone and could barely speak English, maybe that's why it took 4 hours, but we were on the phone for a very long time. And after that, she was staying with me, and I was trying to make, it's now ancient history, but in order to make a cover in those days, you'd make overlays, kind of ruby lith and stuff, and there's a red, a blue, a cyan, and a yellow, and on a black line drawing. And she got fascinated by that, and I had to go off to do a day's work at the bubblegum company I worked at. She said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'll explain it when I get back. It's too complicated." She said, "Tell me now." And, "Oh, okay. So I told it to her in about a 60-second crash course, and I said, "Well, I'll explain it better later." So I went off to work, came back, and she had done an impeccable color separation for this thing without even a guidebook. And as I said in an introduction to another book, so gentlemen, I married her.
Well, I understand. I mean, in our Instagram sort of world, the AI world and so on, I mean, you came up through the underground comics world where there was a real kind of culture of great, these great bohemian, really, artists. Is it possible, do you think, for a young sort of comic artist today to break through like you did?
Possible, but it gets less and less likely because there's more and more stuff. Like on the internet, it's flooded with images. They last about 60 seconds. You move on to something else. Every once in a while, somebody tries to put their comic on internet. It has to be very short, told ever shorter attention spans. But there's a great history of what was comics and still is. And every once in a while, a book breaks through and it blows your mind. So it can be done. But for a young cartoonist to have to set out as his first major try to crack the world is you have to do a 300-page book. It's ridiculous. You have to learn how to do a page first. Yeah. And so there's just a flood of things, and every once in a while, these magical things happen that are brilliant. So it's possible to do, but I mean, when I was teaching, I was always telling the kids, just keep your day job, and don't try to be an illustrator unless you love illustration, because you'll never get out of it and you'll never do the work you might want to do. This is to my comics students. So I can't be optimistic about it, but the computer's a wonderful thing in some ways, and it allowed one to do color separations a lot easier. It allowed you to draw and fix drawings yourself before handing them in. But ultimately, if it keeps going in the direction it's going, you'll just have to get on your computer and say, crucified Easter Bunny, go to it.
Yes, okay, well, I very much hope that doesn't happen. So Mouse also then came roaring back again, just quite recently, right? Because a Tennessee school board unanimously banned it from its curriculum in 2022, citing nudity and profanity, which just had the result of it surging back onto the bestseller list. The rodent rode high.
They did me a great favor,
incredible.
yes.
They did you a great favor. And, I mean, was that very gratifying?
No, I mean, it took me by surprise. The book had already been in schools for decades. But it's part of this thing of, whatever it was, Mothers for Decency or some organization that was literally attacking libraries and schools and school boards to get all this stuff out and put in wholesome things. And when I was asked on the I had to get up really early to be on a morning news show by video, and they were unhappy that I was vaping, but they couldn't stop me. I was at home. And basically, I was just stunned by what had been done. I said, I guess it's because, I think it's better to teach Mouse in schools than just let you dive into it when you're not ready. It has a lot of, even with the Mouse, has horrific images. You showed the one I don't usually like to have people see outside the context of the books, which was the Hungarian Jews in pits being burned near the end of the war. But it seemed to me if you're going to study it at all, it's good to have a study group with you. So on the news show, I just explained, look, they can go home and read Mein Kampf, and their dad will just help them and read it to them. But if they're going to study it at all, read it at all, why not do it in a context? It didn't fly for the school board, but it flew off the shelves. So.
It certainly did. I mean, how do you think that a transgressive artist like you, essentially, can sort of survive in today's cancel culture world? I mean, there are so many sort of self-censoring and so many outward censoring going on. I mean, could we have done those covers now?
No.
No.
Even, when I was growing up, I was working for Playboy magazine and doing stuff for kids for the bubblegum company. But the language of comics is a language of sign systems and symbols. And all of the symbols were being wiped off the map. You couldn't draw, if you had to learn to draw a woman, you'd draw either a charwoman or a witch or a sexy woman. Those were the only three that existed. And it's not wide enough to be able to siphon down unless you have a very savvy audience seeing when you're deconstructing that imagery. And as a result, no. Robert Crumb, who's probably not only the greatest comics artist of my generation, but generations back the greatest, he's an impossible person. He grew up without friends. He had a brother who forced him to become a cartoonist when they were both kids. And as a result, he was an explorer of inner space. And that meant I have this weird image in my head of this monstrous, white-lipped, Al Jolson-like creature. And I said, well, if it got in there, I should put it out. Like it got into his head from somewhere. He didn't invent it. And that was part of the story. And it was another reason, in fact, why Mouse got invented, because I was looking at some old animated cartoons with a mentor of mine, Ken Jacobs, a filmmaker, who pointed out that Mickey Mouse was a jazz-age mouse in the 1920s, and he had a white face and black head. So he was basically a black cartoon character passing for white in a certain way. And those things are part of a language that have to be used and contained and worked with, but Crumb kept crossing the line over and over and over again, and he couldn't help himself because it wasn't all he drew. He drew some magnificent pieces about what's going on in modern America, how his architecture changed from rural life to urban life with a toxic present, and on, as well as his sex fantasies, and that's pretty much overshadowed the entire achievement, which is really large. And so he's still at it. He said, I stopped drawing women. They don't like it when I draw women. So on the other hand, he's probably, as I think Robert Hughes said, the greatest artist of human life since Bruegel. Okay. And I agree.
I tend to think that you're going to end up claiming that mantle. But before we wrap, I just want to share one of your more brilliant New Yorker covers. Not for me, you did this one for David Remnick, who is now the editor. It was after 9/11, and it has really become iconic art. I think all of us in this room remember it. I just wanted to ask you, just quickly, because we're now out of time, but what were you thinking doing this extraordinary black image?
You're mentioning my beautiful wife, right? It was a collaboration. It couldn't have happened without either of us. We still argue about who did what, which is proof that it's a collaboration, I think. But basically, it was very hard to come up with a cover. The editor at the time just wanted to have a black cover, and I was working on something very different from that. And then Françoise was with her friends, and one of them said, you can only have a black cover. And I thought that wasn't a good idea, because it was just one-dimensional. So what about black on black? Because I'd been working on a color image about the towers falling a few blocks from our house, and it wasn't working. And I was stubbornly trying to make it work, because I had to draw a lot of buildings, and I don't like to draw lots of buildings. And Françoise just shoved that aside. The editor shoved that aside, and then David said, well, we should either use a photograph or something just black. And then Françoise was dismayed by that when she said, we're going to use a black cover. I said, no, then you have to make it black on black, because the thing that was hitting me that morning was, it's one of the most beautiful days I've ever seen in New York, a bright, beautiful morning, blue. And I kept doing that and then going, that's not right. So I tried to dim it down and make something between blue and dark gray or something. And I didn't have any evidence of it, but I reconstructed it after to show Françoise, and she was annoyed that I even had it as a thing. But between us, cover couldn't have happened any other way. She's among many things, she's really good at that production stuff. And to make a million copies of a magazine with two blacks that have to be that close can only be done if she was in rapport with the production department. And those were her closest friends at the magazine.
Yeah. Well, Art, we could talk for a long time hearing about your work. I hope all of you will. Actually, Mouse is for sale in our bookshop, our wonderful Haywood Hill bookshop out there. And if any of you haven't seen Mouse for some reason, because it's, I really hope you will buy a copy, because it's just such a masterpiece. And it was a wonderful time we had together.
I'm really
and
glad
thank
to
you
be
so
with
much
again.
for coming to Truth Tellers.
Really.
Yeah.
Thank you.